Hello everyone, welcome back. My microphone started to die towards the end of the last video, so I'm hoping it's going to go better this time, but we'll just have to wait and see. I left off last time about to get to the Plague Marines. I've got a lot to say about the Plague Marines. They've gone through some changes. There's a lot of good, there's a little bit of bad that I need to touch on. But I realised that in my last video, when I was talking about the Lord of Contagion, I talked about the Reaper of Glorious Entropy, but I completely forgot about the Ferryman's Scythe. It's pretty incredible, to be honest. If you need to take the Ferryman battalion to get it, but I think it may even be worth running the battalion detachment for the Ferryman just to get it, because normal Man Reapers are 2 attacks for each 1 attack you make, so he would normally have 10 attacks. He's got 5 base, but the Ferryman's is 3, so he would have 15 attacks, hitting on 2s, potentially wounding on 2s if he was already fighting something that was toughness 3, obviously re-rolling 1s. So I mean, if he just was near some guardsmen or some Eldar or a horde of Gaunts or something, you know, 15 attacks, that would be brutal. So that's definitely something to consider, and I'm just mentioning it because I was really annoyed that I forgot in my last video. But moving on to the Plague Marines, they are down to 5 to 10 now. It's a shame. A lot of people ran units of 20. I ran a nice big blob of 20. I know Bone does on Tabletop Tactics. He's going to have to figure out something else now. But it's not too bad. I think that the units of 10, you know, they'll get the work done still. One of the main things that's changed about them, obviously we've got the nice new stat line with 2 wounds and everything, that's nice. But one of the main things that's changed about them is the war gear loadouts. There's a lot more restrictive now, but it's also not. It's kind of a weird swing now where it's technically more restrictive, but more models can take different war gear than they used to be able to. At least if you've got 10 men in the squad. So one thing that is different and quite interesting, and actually I said that I think I said in my last video that you were only going to have about 2 plague weapons per squad, because I was still thinking of the last edition, but actually you can only have 2 blight launchers per squad. But if you wanted to, with the new loadout here, you could actually have 2 plague spears and 2 plague belchers in the unit. So if you had, say, a unit of 10 in a rhino, that would be 4d6 auto-hitting shots, some of them at strength 5 AP -1, some of them not. I might have to actually maybe buy some more Plague Marines just to make 1 squad with that loadout, so I can do that if I want to. It's not something I'd run army-wide, but maybe if I had a special shock squad in a rhino that could just use the 4 flame weapons, that would be pretty good. But the restrictions come in because you need 10 men in a squad now to have 2 of the weapons. So my loadout that I used last edition, last Codex, won't work anymore because I used to run 9 Plague Marines in a rhino with the combat loadout. But I wouldn't be able to do that now. I'd have to run 10 men, which means I wouldn't be able to have my supporting character, which I used to have, normally a Malignant Plague Caster, but in this book now, it will probably actually be different units, but I'll get those later. So you have to have 10 people in a rhino. It's a bit annoying because there's nothing really Chaos Space Marines have access to outside of Forge World that has the transport capacity of more than 10. So it is going to mean you maybe need to reconsider how you transport them. There's 2 main ways, which I'll mention in a minute. But like I said just now about the 4 plague spears and 2 plague spears and 2 plague belchers, you can also now take 2 great plague cleavers and also 2 flails of corruption, which before you had to choose either or. So now you can have 4 large 2-handed weapons in each unit, and still have 2 guys with the Mace of Contagion and Biotic Axe. And then you could upgrade 2 more axes, but personally I probably wouldn't. I would probably just leave the other couple of guys as chaff, so when you start losing people you don't need to lose the expensive ones. One thing to remember now is that the rule vectors of death has changed slightly. Before it was if they had two maces of a mace of contagion and a bubiotic axe, or two plague knives, they got +1 attack. But now it's just if they have two plague melee weapons. So one thing that you need to remember that you might forget, I'm probably going to forget it, is that even if they have one flail of corruption or one great plague cleaver, they do also have a plague knife. So they technically have two melee plague weapons. So you'll get 3 attacks with the great plague cleaver, and actually 6 attacks with the flail of corruption. The damage unfortunately doesn't spill over anymore. That's one thing they lost. It's a shame to lose it guaranteed all the time, but on the other hand, the stratagem they give you, which is a 1 CP stratagem, I think it's a really good 1 CP stratagem. It allows you to make all damage spill over for a turn. So if you did have a big melee unit and you had 2 maces of contagion, they're 3 damage each, 2 great plague cleavers, that's potentially up to 66 damage if they all hit and wound. And then you'd have 12 attacks with the flails. They're still damage 2, so that could be maximum potential 24 damage. You wouldn't get that obviously, but it's there. I think if you really needed to just remove a unit, maybe a big unit of aggressors or centurions or tyrannid warriors or mega knobs, whatever's multi-wounded that you've got into, or just a big fat unit of 10 heavy intercessors or something, I think that this would be a really clutch stratagem to just have the sheer amount of damage spill over. I think you could pretty much wipe anything away. I mean, even if you got just a couple of those great plague cleaver hits in, had a few d6 damage, and that's gonna be horrific wiping units away. So it's changed, but I think that it's still good. What I would do personally is I think I would dip into the Forge World Codex, and I would take actually a termite assault drill, and I'd have 10 plague marines with the full melee loadout in the assault drill with a Biologist Putrefier. Now that's not something I'd have said last edition, but his rules have changed a bit. I won't skip ahead too much because I'll get to him in a minute, but he actually has a melee weapon buff now. He has just a general effect where melee weapons on 6s to wound cause mortal wounds, so that is definitely something I'll probably keep with my combat squad now. Another thing I really like is the new. I'm not sure what exactly on the sprue is supposed to represent it, but the Sigil of Decay. I thought at first it might be the icon that the guy's sort of holding like this, rather than on the banner stand he's got one to hold it, but in the Codex that's listed as being an icon of despair as well, so I'm not actually sure what a Sigil of Decay is represented by, but it's really good. I think that it's not something I would take on my units if they were meant to be combat units, or maybe if I was using the sprayers, but if I tend to run just standard units of 10 bolt gun, plague knife, plague marines. I've got 2 units of 10. It was 1 unit of 20, but now it'll be 2 units of 10. That's definitely something I'll take on those. Any unmodified hit rolls of 6 automatically wounds a target. I'm already planning to run just standard, pretty basic bolt gun and plague knife, plague marine units with a talisman. Yeah, with the new Tollkeeper relic, because the Tollkeeper changed. I'm pretty sure last edition it was close combat attacks exploded on 6s and gave you extra attacks, but now it's ranged attacks. So all of those bolter shots will be exploding. Well, with the Sigil of Decay, any bolter shots that get 6s to hit will cause an additional hit, or an additional attack. I think it's an additional hit that it just scores. Let me check that. Yep, just an additional hit. And it will also automatically wound with the first shot. So I think that I will probably, for the most part, have maybe 1 shock unit of melee plague marines, similar to how I did last edition, that is just meant to run up there nice and quick, and then probably a solid middle line that can take the middle of the table and stay there, with just bolters, lots and lots of bolters, probably some blight launchers sprinkled in because they're really good, and then a Tollkeeper, and he also has the ability to just essentially do my will be done for the Necrons. Just choose a unit and it's +1 to hit. And if you had a Lord I mean, you know, so you can re-roll the ones. It's going to be good. They want to be sitting in the middle of the table. They're an army that I think works best moving up quite quickly in the first turn, leaving a few units behind, maybe Poxwalkers to hold the back objectives, but ultimately just really cement themselves in the centre of the board and just put it out with bolt fire and maybe the odd assault unit if things start getting too close. But yeah, and they're just supposed to sit there, fire bolters, and be hard to shift. And I think that they're gonna do really good at that. But and it's not unrelated to the models, but a complaint that I do have a complaint. It's not about the unit itself so much, but the way Games Workshop has decided to word codexes now. Apparently, if this sets the standard, to me it's a worrying standard that I don't like, especially for the potentially upcoming Chaos Space Marines Codex. I don't know how it was in the Space Marines Codex. Could have been the same as this. I don't have that. But one thing that I have a problem with is the way that and this is the same for the Blightlord Terminators, which I'll get to as well. They've worded the upgrades essentially as every individual thing that you get in the box, and that's all you can take. Every individual thing. So, for example, if the box only has enough, well, if the box has one double plague knife guy, then in this squad you can now only have one double plague knife guy. The box has one guy. You can only have one melter gun now in Plague Marines. That's another thing. You can have one melter gun or one plasma gun on a normal Plague Marine and one plasma gun on a champion, and I think that's because there's only one melter gun in the box. So that's another thing. And it's maybe more noticeable in the Blightlords later because they're limited to things like just one combi melter, one combi plasma, and so on, because they only have one combi melter in the box. They only have one combi plasma in the box, and so now that translates to only having one in the squad. And I hate this. I hate it. I think it's a horrible decision. And it's definitely something I'm going to have a good whinge about probably for the next couple of years until it changes. I think that it's very anti-consumer. I think that, you know, a lot of people obviously have bought more kits or extra bits off of bit sites and things to equip their squads with what they want. And now Games Workshop just saying, no, you can only have what exactly you get in the box. It's going to invalidate a lot of people's loadouts. I don't think it's a good precedent. Again, I've referenced tabletop tactics earlier. I know Bone had about, you know, he had that big blob of 20 and he obviously outsourced to eBay bit sites to get them all equipped with axes, and he can't do that now. He can have 2 per 10, so only 4 of those 20 are even legal to have axes now. So and I think that ultimately it's boring. It's going to be really, really boring if you have all of your units just armed identically. Personally, I have a unit of Iron Warriors Terminators, which I have equipped with combi melters and chain fists, which I got through buying more of the Chaos Lord / Sorcerer box sets. In the future, that may be different because the Chaos Space Marines Terminators kit is disgustingly bad. I was shocked that they got away with it at the time, but that's how it is. They've got literally one of each weapon choice in that box. So in the next Chaos Space Marines Codex, really, you have to have one chain axe, one power maul, one lightning claw guy, limited, one combi melter, that sort of thing. It's terrible, and I don't know why they've done it, but that's how it is. It's unfortunate. We'll just have to see how it is in Codexes going forwards, I suppose, because I've got the Necrons Codex. I didn't notice it in that, but I hadn't played them in the previous edition, so if there was changes like this, I wouldn't have noticed. I think that's it for Plague Marines, really. They're very good. They're definitely always the spine of my army. I've never been a fan of Cultists or Poxwalkers even, which are next, actually. In fact, let me go over there right now. I'm not going to talk about cultists because they're just cultists. They're not special, they don't even have contagions, they are just literally cultists, and I don't think that you should be using them, to be honest. It's not up to me to judge other people's armies, but I don't think that cultists have got any place in the Death Guard personally. Poxwalkers, I feel similarly about them in that I don't personally like them, I don't use them really. I think that you should just use Plague Marines, but they at least have a role to fill. They are fearless. In effect, they don't take morale tests. So if you want cheap 50-point units of 10 guys to just stand at the back of the field on objectives, then they're there for that. But personally, I would rather just maybe have a couple of units of 5 Plague Marines, because they can at least then keep shooting their bolters and blight launchers and whatever they've got. They're probably not going to fail their morale test with a unit of 5 anyway. They're going to be a lot tougher than these guys, seeing as they've only got 6+. Feel no pain now. I know that you can stack them up, beef them up to the point where they're fairly effective in combat. They've got 2 attacks each. You can get them re-rolling to hit. You can get them +1 strength up to strength 4 with Typhus. They do have contagions, so they'll be actually wounding on Marines on 3s, because they'd be strength 4 with Typhus, and then strength 4 then minusing 1 toughness, or just wounding on 4s because they minus Marines down to toughness 3, or if they are against other armies, they'd be making them toughness 2. So 2 attacks hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s potentially, or 4s, re-rolling to hit, and there's a stratagem where they inflict mortal wounds on 6s. You could, but it's not something I bother with, especially since they're now limited to 20. I'm sure that previously you could have had 30 or maybe even 40 of them, and that would have been hard to shift. But 20, now they're down to the 6+, feel no pain. I really don't think people are going to have much trouble just spraying units of 20 or away with bolters and whatever else they've got. They're not something I bother with. I'd rather stick to Plague Marines anyway. So getting into the elites now, that's all you've got for troops. I think that Plague Marines are the solid spine, the solid backbone of your army. They're really versatile. They can be ranged, they can be melee based, they're good and tough to shift. If you really wanted to, you could use Cloud of Flies for 2 command points to hide them. Yeah, so onto the elites. We start with the Noxious Blightbringer. Now, I didn't like this model last edition. I never used him personally. I don't think I even used him once. And I did play a fair few Death Guard games, because I think he made you give you +1 to advance or something. I didn't think that it was very useful. But he does still give you, well, he gives you now +1 move and advance. I don't think he gave you +1 move before. He might have done. But it's okay, I don't think it's that useful. He now has the Empiric Malaise aura, which is a 6-inch aura where Psychers have to subtract 1. I don't actually think that as a base unit he is useful. However, I probably will take him in a lot of games now, especially with a combat squad of Plague Marines, because he does have access, and he's the only model that has access to the Demon's Toll. Now in the last Psychic Awakening book, the Demon's Toll, I believe, gave a 5+ invulnerable save within a 6-inch aura, but now once per battle you can choose a unit within 6 inches, and on a 2+, it can't fall back and must remain in with you. I think that he's potentially worth taking just for that. I do have a bit of a plan, which it involves units later, so I'll just leave that for later. But I do have a bit of a plan with this guy. But honestly, unless you're going to be taking that Demon's Toll, I don't really think that he's going to do much for you. Now though, a unit that I do really like, and a unit that I was a big fan of last edition, and he's still really good now, the Foul Blight Spawn. This model, he's so good. He's such a good unit. His Plague Spreader did take a hit, but that's fine because it was too good. Strength 2d6, AP -3, damage 3. It was definitely too good, and it's still good now. It's Assault d6, Strength 7, AP -3, damage 2. AP -3 is good enough. Damage 2 is good enough. It didn't need to be damage 3. It's good enough. And Strength 7 does mean if you're within contagion, you'll still be wounding Marines on 2s. And if anything, it's more guaranteed than last time, because you could have rolled anything on this 2d6. He is the one model that can take the Vomitrix relic, which gives him a guaranteed Assault 7 shots. If you're running the Mortarion's Favoured Sons army list, then I'd give it to him, but I don't think I'd necessarily take that battalion just to give him that relic. But what's so good about him, and his rule has changed, but I think it's changed for the better, because he actually gets 2 abilities now, including the same one that he used to have. So his base ability has changed to now choosing a unit that's within 3 inches of him in the fight phase, and that unit cannot fight until all other units have done so. I'm really happy for Chaos to get that rule finally. I've been looking at it quite jealously in various other codexes like Tyrannids and I think Slaanesh Demons maybe. So now we've got it in the Death Guard. It's very powerful. I've always been scared of it happening to me, having a Demon Prince or something, just be told to fight last and getting picked off before it's done anything. It's, in an age of characters like Ragnar Blackmane that are going to chew up an entire squad of Plague Marines, I think that it's going to be really useful. And the reason I'm so happy is because he's technically lost the old rule, but he can still take a relic which does the exact same thing. It's called Revolting Stench Vats, and it's a 6-inch aura, which does the same thing. The enemy units within 6 inches cannot use any rules that allow them to fight first and never count as having made a charge move. So he still does what he did last edition, which I really loved him for, and now he's got another rule on top, which is something you choose a character. So that the relic would affect all units, and then this would, I think, particularly affect a character. If you got charged by Calgar and some Sword Brethren, you could choose Calgar to fight last, and then have the Sword Brethren at least lose their charge bonus and all that sort of thing. And that's really powerful for being charged, because in 9th edition it's now the opponent who chooses the first unit if there are no charging units. So it's even better than it was in 8th, when they'd still have attacked first because it was the opponent's turn. But now you take away their charging ability and choose your own unit to fight first. I think this is incredible. I think people are going to be really reluctant to charge you with this guy around. It's maybe not quite as good as he used to be because there was stratagem. You can't give him the Revolting Stench Vats and the Fulguris Helm, which is something I liked to do last time to get 3 inches on his normal aura. Can't do that now. Although, if you put him with the Ferrymen, I think you could use that stratagem on Droning Wings to increase his 6 inches to 12 inches and have all units within 12 inches lose their charge bonus. So that's probably something I would do, seeing as that's already a really good battalion to take. You could take the Ferryman Scythe in that case as well. So yeah, I'm really happy with the Foul Blight Spawn. I think he's a solid unit. He always was. He's definitely still solid now. With a damage 2 Plague Spray, he might not be shooting planes straight out of the sky anymore, but it's still really good. Right, another Biologist Putrefier. I mentioned him earlier because he's got a new rule, but before I get to that, he's largely the same. He still has his Hyper Blight Grenade, and he still does have an aura ability for his Blight Racks, which boost blight grenades. It's not the same as it was, but it's still very good. Now obviously, unfortunately, we knew it was going to happen, but we lost the blight bombardment stratagem. It was completely broken. It was insane. I did kill a knight one time with the mortal wounds alone. Never mind the actual damage. But it's actually still really good for the use that you can do with it. So what it does now, instead of making them strength 4 and damage 2, it now makes them AP -1 and damage 2, which I think potentially is better. Actually, I think it might be even better now, because AP -1 damage I think means more probably than being strength 4. But the reason I think it's so good, and like I already said, he has a new rule called Foul Infusion, which is a 6-inch ability where you choose one friendly unit, and until the next command phase, each time they make a melee attack with a plague weapon and you get a wound roll of 6, it inflicts 1 mortal wound in addition to any damage. So I was already saying that I would probably take him maybe in a termite or something with a unit of combat melee based plague marines. And I think the reason I said a termite for the transport capacity of 12 is because I also thought that I might take one of these noxious blightbringers along for the ride with the Demon's Toll, because something I'm thinking of already is using, well, you have a horrific fight phase where you use the stratagem that lets you to spill over damage, so you can just wipe something hopefully with all of your extra damage, and then maybe you can consolidate into another unit. You've got the mortal wounds on 6s, that will just help you mince through the first unit hopefully, and hopefully you could consolidate into another unit, and this guy could use his Demon's Toll to make them remain on a 2+, so they're stuck there next turn, because I would want to also use probably my favourite new stratagem. It's probably the favourite stratagem in the whole book. It's not as good as the Blight Bombardment that we used to have, but it's called the Blightening. Oh, the Blightening! It's so good. I'm gonna... it's 1 CP, and you use it in your shooting phase, which is why it's important to still be in combat in your shooting phase. You can't do it after you've charged, it is in the shooting phase, which is why I would want to trap the unit with the Demon's Toll. But you choose up to 3 Plague Marines, and they can throw a Blight Grenade each. They get an automatic 6 shots because it changes from a grenade D6 to pistol 6, and they automatically hit, so that would be 18 automatic hits. 18 automatic hits. If you're in combat, you'll be within the -1 toughness aura. So if you were fighting Marines, let's say it's the meta, so it's probably Marines. They would be toughness 3, so you'd be wounding on 4s, re-rolling 1s for plague weapon. You may even be within Arch Contaminator range. I normally try to be, but if you're not, it's going to be 4s re-rolling 1s, or even 3s re-rolling 1s if you're fighting other units that were toughness 3 and are now toughness 2. 18 automatic hits, AP -1, that's going to be quite important, putting people down to a 4+ save if they're Marines, or even less potentially for other armies. And then damage 2. I think that if you were in combat with some Marines, let me do it. Here we go. Let me do it right now. Gonna do it live. Gonna do it live. 18 dice. Auto hit. They've already hit. 18 shots. They've already hit. Already hit. Winning on 4s, let's say. Rerolling the 1s. Taking away the failed wounds. We just got 3, 6, 9 wounds, and then 4+ saves against Space Marines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 dead Marines, 7 dead Intercessors, 7. Anything that's 2 wounds, it's dead. I think that for 1 command point, 7 dead Intercessors, I don't think you can argue with that. This is definitely a stratagem that I'm going to use as often as I can. Again, you do need to be in a shooting phase, so I think the most useful way to get there would be to use the Demon's Toll on a Noxious Blightbringer, but you might just end up there anyway. You don't have to try to use this stratagem. It could be a nice little trick that you can just pull out by surprise because you just happen to be in combat with something still. Maybe whether they didn't fall back or maybe they charged you in your turn, and rather than fall back you stayed in combat in your turn just so you could use this. I think that it could potentially free you up. Let me just see actually if we can use the damage spillover stratagem. I should know this if I'm talking about the book, like I know what I'm talking about. Haze of Corruption. Oh no, it's in the fight phase. No, it's in the fight phase. So you can let the damage spill over against one wound units, but still, that's really good. And I think that the dice have made it speak for itself. And then the Tallyman. I mentioned him just now as well because of the Tollkeeper relic. He is actually not a unit that I really took last edition. I tried to in a couple games, but his main ability was being a Dark Apostle in effect, where he gave you a reroll to hit aura. But he himself is not a combat unit, and it was always really awkward to get him near combat but not in combat because he would just die and he's got no attacks. So he was awkward to position for that. And then his other ability was giving you command points, but only if you rolled exactly a 7. That was much harder than I think they think they went on the basis that a 7 is the average, or the most likely, well not the average, but the most likely result of a 2d6 because there's the most possible ways to make it. But it just doesn't really happen that often. I went through a couple entire games never getting a 7, and at the time he was just maybe stood behind a building or something, and I was thinking, why have I taken him? He's just 65, 70 wasted points. But now it's something you do in the command phase, and you just roll 2d6, and on a 7+ now, it's a 7+ now, not an exact 7. If you get a 7+ in the command phase, you get a command point. I think that's definitely worth taking him for. In addition to, again, malicious calculation, it's the ability that allows him to choose a core unit within 6 inches and give it +1 to hit, which is a great ability. I think that he's definitely a mainstay character. I think that he's definitely a character that I would like to take in probably every game now. I think regardless of my actual game plan, I would take him. He's very good. And then the Plague Surgeon. Now I don't actually even own a Plague Surgeon model because I never bought one last edition. I didn't think they did much. They gave you reroll 1s to your Feel No Pain. I thought that was negligible, honestly. I didn't care about rerolling 1s. It wasn't really enough to make a difference in my opinion. So I never owned one, and he had some random rule where I think he got +1 to hit and wound against Astartes because he was a gene seed thief or something. He's lost that. It's kind of a random rule that he's lost. There's been a general trimming of additional rules, like the Blight Lords no longer have the additional AP on 6s to wound that they used to have. But that's okay. The things that you forgot about anyway. So the Tainted Narthessium, it's a 6+ Feel No Pain. I've never liked to rely on 6+ Feel No Pains or any kind of 6+ save, whether it's an invulnerable save or an armor save. It's not something I would really bake in as part of my army that I counted on working for me. I've seen it used already. Again, in tabletop tactics, they use the on-droning wings every turn to make it extend to I think a 9-inch bubble. But honestly, I don't think that you really make enough 6+ Feel No Pains for it to be too worth it. If you had the points left over, and you could just slot him in without making much of a difference, then obviously then it would be worth it. But I personally wouldn't take a character to give me a 6+ Feel No Pain because I just don't think that you would really make enough of them for it to be worth it. But that's up to you. That's up to you. I've always looked at 6+ saves as a bit of a false hope situation. It's something you think is good to spend some points on, or a command point on, and then you never actually make any of them. But you know, it could pay off if you roll well. And then the D3 wounds, healing D3 wounds on an infantry model. So essentially, he could put a 1 wound Plague Marine back up to 2 wounds, or he could take a 1 or 2 wound Terminator back up to 3 wounds, or maybe heal a character a little bit. It's okay. It's not something I would bother with though. Honestly, I think that when you've got these other choices, let's say you take 3 for 1 elite's choice, I think that it would be a Biologist Putrefier, a Tallyman, and either a Foul Blightspawn or Noxious Blightbringer. I really don't think that he's going to make too much of a difference. I mean, the 6+ Feel No Pain. It's only within 3 inches base, you see. 3 inches, 6+ Feel No Pain, unless you're specifically spending a command point every turn to use the On Droning Wings stratagem to make it a 9-inch one. Or you could give him the Fulgaris Helm, and that would make it a 6-inch aura. So actually, you know, a 6-inch aura for a 6+ Feel No Pain, it wouldn't be bad. But you really have to think about how he's going to fit into your army. Like I mentioned in the last video, I've never been a fan of having too many Plague Marines on the board. I tend to like having them in vehicles until they're needed. But if you are the kind of player that has a lot of infantry on the board, Terminators and Plague Marines on the grounds, that you can keep within range of a character, then fine. But you know, I'd rather they just maybe weren't on the board to take damage to begin with. I'd rather the Terminators were in Deep Strike until they were needed, or the Plague Marines were in Rhinos until they had to be out. I would never use him like a sort of an on the board linchpin to specifically give that a bonus to the other infantry units that are on the table, which in my opinion shouldn't be on the table to begin with. So yeah, that's my opinion on the Plague Surgeon. And then Blightlord Terminators. Now, I think for a lot of people, Blightlord Terminators were a real staple. I only bought some towards the end of 8th edition. Well, towards the end of the Codex. I think the games I played were 9th edition. But I only got into them towards the end. Now, the big thing about them is they kept their 4+ invulnerable save. That's really great. We were worried about them losing that because the Marines had their Cataract armour changed to a Relic armour, which doesn't have any bonuses like it used to. So them keeping it makes them quite unique, and it's definitely, I think it was important to me because I was thinking that if they lost the 5+ Disgustingly Resilient and the 4+ Invulnerable went down to a 5+, I did not feel that between the 5+ Invulnerable save and the -1 damage they were going to be anywhere near resilient enough. I really felt that just wouldn't do it for them. It wouldn't do it for them. So a 4+ invulnerable save and -1 damage for Disgustingly Resilient. I think that they are still quite solid. I mentioned earlier with the Plague Marines that they are limited to exactly what comes in the box. You can actually give each model a Plague Sword, a Bale Sword or a Bubotic Axe, which is nice that you can at least do that, even though I don't think that you get enough in the box, but you might do. So you can still do that at least, but the ranged weapons, you can have 1 Combi Flamer, 1 Combi Melter, or 1 Combi Plasma. This is horrible. I said it earlier, this is horrible. I don't know why they've done it. I don't like them doing it. I think it's a really bad decision. I hope it doesn't spill over to other codexes later, but it probably will. This is probably how they're going to do it from now on. The special weapons like the Plague Spewer and Flail of Corruption haven't changed. You still get 1 per 5 models, and that's fine. That's how it was, but limiting their ranged weapons is definitely a shame, because I wouldn't be surprised if there were people out there that had made sure to get them, you know, 5 combi melters or 5 combi plasmas or flamers or something, just so they could really dedicate for a particular job, especially since these Terminators don't have power fists or chain fists. I think that maybe I personally didn't get around to it. Mine are just equipped with, I think, bolters, but I would not be surprised if there were people that had taken 5 combi melters, because with the absence of power fists and things, these Terminators are definitely lacking in dealing with anything anti-vehicle or anti-monster. So it's a shame. It's just a shame. It's a shame. But that being said, they're definitely still a solid choice. They have a nice stratagem called Vermid Whispers, which gives them +1 to hit, just 1 CP, and they get +1 to hit. It's really good if you've got a Lord of Contagion near them or something. That's just straight away hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Last edition I tried running a big squad with just combi bolters and using a Lord of Contagion with the Arch Contaminator Warlord trait, and using Vermid Whispers, which I think existed back then. It might have been called something else, but you could use a stratagem that gave them +1 to hit, and Virulent Rounds to really try to just spray something down. I don't think I would bother doing that again in this edition, seeing as the Virulent Rounds is no longer AP -4 on 6s to wound, and it didn't actually do much for me at the time anyway. But oh, and another hit is that the Cloud of Flies is now 4 command points. That's a bit heavy to me. I would have understood maybe 3 command points, but I wouldn't know. But perhaps Blightlord Terminators with Cloud of Flies was a big tournament meta thing, and that's how they've decided to ruin it. But for me, it seems a bit excessive. 4 command. There's not many things you have to pay 4 command points for. I don't think that hiding a unit of 10 Blightlords would be worth 4 command points. I don't think that they really do enough to be worth hiding for 4 command points. But maybe people out there have battle plans where they like to just clog up the centre of the board, deny the central 6 inches with them. So for them, maybe playing Cloud of Flies for 1 turn or 2 turns maybe would be worth it, because it's changed. You don't need anything in front of you anymore. You just can't be targeted from over 12 inches. So even if there was nothing in front of you, as long as the enemy were 12 inches away, you just can't be targeted. So, you know, if your plan is to just clog up the centre of the board or something, deny a certain area, deny a certain objective, then it could still be worth it. But for 4 command points, it had better be part of your dedicated battle plan, because it's not a 4 command points that you're going to just throw around for the sake of it. It's certainly different from being 1 command point last time, which again I can accept was maybe too good, but I think it could have been maybe 2 command points for the Plague Marines and 3 for the Terminators. I think the 4 command points is a bit much and a bit of a shame. You'll still see it though, I expect. Now, Death Shroud Terminators are a unit that, in my opinion, had a very rough 8th edition. They were horrifically pointed, and then dropped about 3 times, about 10 or 20 points. I think they started off about 76 points each or something ridiculous, and they went down to 60, 50, and then eventually they ended up at about 44 points, 46 points, something like that. They're back up to 50 now, but I think that in this codex they might actually be worth taking. I tried using them before. They just weren't really worth their points. They didn't really do enough. They weren't survivable enough. I always thought that 2 wounds was crazy. They're huge models. They barely fit onto the 40mm bases. They'd look more at home on 50s. So even though they've gone up to 3 wounds now, I think they actually should have really gone up to 4 wounds personally. There's certainly smaller models out there that have 4 wounds, but it's still good. And with -1 damage, and a 4+ invulnerable save. I think that they are more survivable now than they were last edition, and they're certainly more competent in combat, because before they were just, they were strength 8 with D3 damage, so they were essentially power fists, although without -1 to hit. However, they were only weapon skill 3+. Now they're weapon skill 2+, with the versatility of 2 different attack methods, cleave and scythe, and this is why I think they're so good now. The cleave is +3 strength, making them strength 7. That's enough to wound marines on 2s if you're in combat with your contagion. It's also enough to wound most vehicles on 3s. If they were toughness 7 vehicles, most vehicles are, you'll be wounding them on 3s too. And then it's AP -3 and damage 2. It is -1 to hit. However, if you really needed something dead, you could just use the Vermid Whisper stratagem and give them +1 to hit again, so they'd be back to hitting on 2s. And I think that a unit with 4 attacks each, 5 attacks on the champion, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s for the Lord of Contagion that is obviously with them, wounding on 2s for being strength 7 versus toughness 3, AP -3 damage 2, that's going to smash anything that gets in its way, any marines I think, any tanks even, it should get rid of. And the scythe, just being able to scythe, I'm so happy about this. This is going to be a lot of fun to use, because before, I think the Death Guard being such expensive and low model count units, they could struggle against the more numerous armies like Tyrannids and Orcs. My friend plays Orcs as her main army. And the limited numbers of Death Guard is definitely a problem, but being able to scythe with the Man Reaper's profile, they make 2 attacks, so the normal guys would have 8 attacks and the champion would have 10 attacks for a total of 26 attacks, and that's just for a unit of 3, 26 attacks. I think personally I like to add a guy and have a unit of 4, so but that's because I'm a crazy person that likes to use Land Raider still, so I'd have a unit of 4 with a Lord of Contagion and a Land Raider. It's ridiculous. I know nobody uses Land Raiders, you probably don't. So, you know, whether you want to go for a unit of 5 or 6, even if you deep strike them, I don't know what you do, but you know, even a unit of 3 is going to be putting out 26 attacks. There's no minus to hit on the scythe attacks, so be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 3s against marines, but potentially if you were facing, you know, guard, Eldar, Tyrannids, you'd be wounding on 2s as well, rerolling for the plague weapon. These are definitely a unit that I would put with an Arch Contaminator Warlord to just get flat rerolls to wound, I think. Lord of Contagion maybe, so they can deep strike down or get out the Land Raider in my case. Hitting on 2s with the Vermid Whispers. If they need it. Rerolling 1s to wound after wounding on 2s. Oh no, my mic pack. Oh no. Yeah. I'm too chunky. And the Chimes of Contagion actually do something now. I don't think that last edition they had any rules. They were just a weird thing that the champion held. Now they extend their contagion range by 3 inches, so if you got these guys in combat turn 2, they'd have a, well, turn 1, they'd have a 4-inch range on turn 1. If you got them in turn 3, they'd be up to 6 inches already, I think. So they're a really good unit now. They still have the bodyguard rule, but they can no longer do it to Mortarion. They don't exist to just tank for Mortarion anymore. But that's fine, because I never liked it. They were too expensive to do that. You were already paying 70 points for Mortarion and you didn't want to sacrifice another 300 point unit of Terminator just to keep him alive a bit longer. So that's fine. I think it mainly exists because obviously if you had a unit of 3 of them or 4 of them, the standard rules would not allow them to body, well, you can only bodyguard if you have 3 or more. So if you got, you know, 2 guys left, if you had a unit of 3, then 1 died and they were on 2 guys, or 1 guy left even, normally they would not guard that character anymore, but now they still do because of this aura. I think though, definitely, I don't want to get executed by the internet if anybody actually watches this. But so I'm not going to say they're better than Blightlord Terminators, but personally, I like them more than Blightlord Terminators, and I think that for my armies, I will be using them probably more often and more numerously than Blightlord Terminators. I think that they're great. I may even go full insanity and just be the worst Death Guard player in the world by running 2 Land Raiders with these guys inside. I just like that they I like that they have that split profile, so if you're up against something tough, you can smash it essentially with the cleave attack, which is still your power fist attack essentially, but you have that versatility to scythe your way through any mobs of infantry that try to bog you down. I think they're so useful. They're definitely one of my top choices now, and I ordered another box set this morning, so yeah. And now we get to the Hellbrute Dreadnought, says Paul. I call them Dreadnoughts as well, personally. I'm going to stop saying Hellbrute now, you won't hear me say it again. It is a Dreadnought. I'm a huge fan of them. I've got a number of them. Last edition, they were something that I got and used quite often because I thought they were just better for their points than the Mephitic Blight Haulers. They were both essentially Dreadnoughts, but I'm not a fan of the weapons loadout on these guys. I was always much more fond of having a twin las cannon and a fist on the Dreadnought. I thought that it was more effective for the points, but they're different now anyway. Dreadnoughts are. I'm just so happy that 8th edition and now 9th edition has given Dreadnoughts a home finally, after being absolutely worthless for so many editions and just sitting on people's shelves gathering dust. I think that really any weapon options are good, apart from the Hellbrute Hammer. I don't think it's very good, but no. The Power Scourge is probably my favourite. It would be Strength 7, AP minus 2 damage 2, and with 3 additional attacks. He has 5 attacks base, so if you chose to dedicate your attacks to that, you'd have 8 attacks. 8 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, because he has Contagion as well. He has the Contagions of Nurgle, so he's also -1 toughness. But personally, I think I'll keep running them with the twin las cannon and the fist. Obviously they can move and fire now without the penalty, but just because of 8th, but that was why I liked them in because of 9th. That's why I liked them in 8th, because the Death Guard ones would ignore that. But now all vehicles ignore it. They're still worth it, and they do not have disgustingly resilience. They have monstrous resilience, which is just -1 damage. They're not -2 damage. But what they do have is the frenzy rule has changed. Well, I say for the better. It didn't happen much, but it was a lot of fun to roll that 6 and just really annoy your opponent. But now it's a more useful rule, and it's something that happens all the time. As soon as you lose a wound, as soon as you lose even 1 wound and go down to 7, you just have rerolls of 1. Rerolls of 1 to wound for the rest of the game. That's incredible. Rerolls of 1 to wound in combat with his fist, rerolls of 1 to wound with his las cannons and shooting, and he's a core unit. And as a core unit, he's able to benefit from your Chaos Lord's reroll 1s aura. So if you took, say, 3 of them, like I do, 3 of them with twin las cannons and fists, they'll be rerolling 1s to hit, and as soon as they get a wound chipped off them, they'll be rerolling 1s to wound as well. They have a new stratagem called Fire Fever instead of Fire Frenzy. That's +1 to hit and wound. Obviously you have to choose one, but that would potentially mean that you had a twin las cannon or some other weapon hitting on 2s and wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. So good, and I'm very happy they're still good. The last Elite's choice are the... Oh, my microphone again. I'm going to just leave it on the table here. The last Elite's choice are the Possessed. Now, I'm probably going to do an entire video one day on the Possessed, giving my full thoughts, because I have a lot of thoughts on the Possessed, regardless of what Codex they're in. I think that they get treated pretty badly. They're not in a good position as far as I'm concerned, and they are better now. In this Codex, at least, because they're Death Guard, it's probably just because they're Death Guard, they are toughness 5 now. They have 4 attacks base instead of D3 or D3 plus 1, I think it might have been. You know, an infantry model that has 4 attacks base, it is good. Strength 5, AP minus 2, damage 1. But the main problem with Possessed that I think you face is that they just don't stand out against the other Elite's choices. Nobody, well, I say nobody, some people might. I would never even think about taking Possessed over Terminators, Blightlord Terminators, Death Shroud Terminators, Hellbrutes, the single buff characters that you could have. They're just, in the Elite's choice, they're just the bottom choice, I think. They don't really do anything well enough to be worth taking. They're very bland. They got no upgrades, no war gear, no special rules. They've got nothing. They're just a stat line and a points cost, and that's one of my main problems with them. They're like a unit that the rules writers can never be bothered to do anything with, and it's just a shame. But they're just, yeah. I know they've got their combos and their stratagems. I'm not gonna sit here and talk about the demon bomb and all that sort of thing. I know there's still a lot of ways that you could stack them up. I know there's still a lot of bonuses that you could do, but I don't think it's worth me talking about. And it's already known anyway. Everybody already knows the things you could do with Possessed. But as they are, if we're just talking about this Codex, I don't think there's any point in taking them. I think you'd be much better off just sticking with your Terminators and other units. And then we would move on to the fast attack next, but I think I'm going to end this video here for tonight, because there's quite a lot to get through between fast attack and heavy support. So yeah, I'm going to stop there for today. Thank you again if you've made it this far into the video. I will most likely do maybe 2 more parts now. I think the fast attack, the heavy support, Mortarion, and the terrain feature, and then maybe another video that's just based on stratagems, warlord traits, relics, and various combinations and things you can do with them, if there's other things that I haven't mentioned already. But yeah, I hope I'll see you again. Thank you.